Armored Core 6: Fires of Rubicon. Should you finally try it in 2024? Well, I did, and I think you should too. 2023 was a pretty huge year for gaming. There were some absolutely incredible releases, as well as some that left, well, let's just say a little something to be desired. About 3 weeks after the official release of future Game of the Year winner Baldur's Gate 3, which absolutely took the world by storm, another title released. One that was a continuation of a series that hadn't seen a new entry in nearly 10 years. Armored Core 6: Fires of Rubicon, developed by none other than From Software. You see, before FromSoft released Demon's Souls, Dark Souls, and subsequent games, they made mech games, a lot of them. Fires of Rubicon is actually the 16th entry in the series. For many, myself included, the latest title would stand as a potential modern entry point into the mech-filled universe of Armored Core. The story trailer that was unveiled in the month prior to its release certainly set the stage for what looked to be an incredible journey. So, does it deliver? To put it simply, yes. Even as a newcomer to the series, with essentially no knowledge about any of the past titles, I was absolutely hooked. I came into this one expecting to blow up lots of enemy mechs and maybe experience an average story along the way. Yeah, I was way off on that. Well, maybe not the mech destruction part, but man, this game is just so much more than that. It honestly reminds me of another era in gaming, the PlayStation 2 era. Particularly, it gives me feelings similar to those that the so-called Holy Trinity of Ace Combat games gave me, which are some of my favorite games of all time. Perhaps this is due to the influence of past entries in the series, which, looking back, there were a ton of Armored Core games on the 6th gen console, but since I haven't personally experienced them, I can't say for certain. What I will say though is this: Armored Core 6 perfectly captures the experience of playing an action game that is focused solely on one thing, the player's experience, nothing else. Whether it's depth of gameplay, customization and personalization, story, the power of choice, or more, this is a seriously good game that you shouldn't pass up on, even if you've never played a previous entry. Now, before we really get into it here, I just want to say that I'm going to try to keep this as spoiler-free as possible, particularly with some of the bigger stuff that happens later in the game's story. We'll be discussing the overall plot of the game, including something pretty big that occurs at the end of the first of the game's 5 acts, but I really feel it's necessary to discuss this plot point to actually give an overall picture of what the game's story is about. There may be some gameplay shown though that, even if it's out of context, could spoil something for you, so if you really want to experience the game 100% blind, you've been warned. The game puts you in the shoes of augmented human C4621, otherwise known as Raven, a mercenary that has undergone significant biological and cybernetic changes in an effort to create a sort of ultimate pilot, with increased skills and limited emotions, that sort of makes you into the ultimate killing machine. You quickly establish a working relationship with your broker, Handler Walter, as you arrive on Rubicon 3 to operate as an independent merc. He sets you up with jobs, you handle them, no questions asked. Pretty soon though, you begin to realize that things on Rubicon may not necessarily be as simple as they appear. Of course, there seems to be a ton of politicking and back and forthing that takes place between the planet's factions and political powers, but there's something more. That something is coral. Described as a sublime substance, the exotic material was first discovered on the planet and quickly recognized for its incredible properties, particularly in energy production and its capabilities as a data conduit. It seemed to have the capability to usher humanity into a sort of new golden age. But for all its potential to aid humanity, it also had a serious drawback: volatility. In an event that would go on to be known as the Fires of Ibis, a massively destructive fire sets off a sort of chain reaction that burns the coral on Rubicon and the space surrounding it, engulfing the whole system in flames. The coral is thought to have all but burned in this event, but we quickly learn that this isn't the case. The final mission of Act 1 sees the player get caught up in a massive coral explosion. Raven survives the event, but seems to pick up a new passenger.
Who are you? An older type of augmented human, 4th generation. Have we made contact?
Air, a sort of disembodied Rubiconian intelligence, she's able to interact with Raven due to the coral in his body from his initial augmentation procedure, which involved the substance. Things really start to get interesting from this point forward as we begin to learn that coral is much more than just a fuel to be harvested and utilized for the expansion of humanity. It's actually a sort of life form. This produces a sort of moral dilemma that the player character is faced with when it comes to the story of the game, and ultimately, the player must choose a certain path to go down. There are 3 distinctly different endings that can be achieved, each with a different fate for Rubicon and its coral. Although it's worth mentioning that the 3rd ending can only be achieved on your 3rd playthrough. I won't go into the details of these endings in the video, but rest assured that they are distinctly different from one another. This isn't a Mass Effect 3 situation. The story in this one sort of snuck up on me. I honestly wasn't expecting something quite on its level, but as good as it is, the gameplay is where this one really shines. Movement feels smooth and fluid, while at the same time feeling just weighty enough in certain situations. Weapons sound and feel powerful to use, and in my opinion, perfectly match the performance I would expect of them based on their appearance and description. Have an enormous shoulder-mounted cannon equipped? You can bet it's going to be absolutely devastating to anything it makes contact with. The sound design's also on point, further adding to the immersion as you let loose volleys of lead, plasma, or missiles on those opposing you. From the very beginning, the game does an awesome job of conveying the fantasy of being a deadly mech pilot to the player. In typical FromSoft fashion, what amounts to the game's initial tutorial has a boss at the end which puts any enemies that you face before it to shame. Surprisingly, it only took me a couple of attempts to down, but this is definitely the first difficulty spike in the game, which, while we're on the topic of difficulty, we may as well discuss it. For the most part, your typical run-of-the-mill enemies that you encounter in missions aren't that challenging. Sure, if you happen to find yourself surrounded and maybe have some long-range cannon fire raining down on you, you might find yourself overwhelmed, but for the most part, if you don't rush too far ahead, you can take down standard enemies without taking too much damage. If you do happen to take some damage though, you start each mission with 3 repair kits available, which grant you a bit of self-healing capability. Sometimes you'll even get the opportunity to resupply, refilling your health, ammo, and giving you a brand new stock of repair kits. Normally when you get one of these though, it's for one reason. There's a boss fight coming. Bosses are an entirely different animal compared to the rest of a mission's enemies. They definitely have a certain level of difficulty affiliated with them, some more than others, and all of the major boss encounters are entirely unique in their own right. In typical FromSoft fashion, conquering a boss requires learning their attack patterns and movements, knowing when you need to use a dodge or when you can simply just keep moving to avoid an attack. I'm not lying when I say that you're gonna die, at least a few times, but maybe a lot, depending on how well you adapt to boss encounters in games like this. There were maybe 1 or 2 bosses that I killed on the first go, but most of them killed me several times, and some of them much more than that. The thing with this game and its boss fights though, if you keep dying, it's kinda your fault. You're either not dodging or moving when you need to, trying to apply DPS when you shouldn't, or maybe your build needs to be switched around. Which, thankfully, there's a checkpoint system present in the game. If you die in a boss attempt, you don't have to go back and play through the whole mission again, and you're given an opportunity to change up your build prior to redeploying, directly from the mission failed screen, which brings me to my next main point. Customization. Whether it's just swapping from kinetic-based weapons to energy-based weapons to deal with a boss that has a pesky energy shield, switching from a big cannon to missiles that hit fast enemies, or changing up your build entirely, the ability to customize your mech's loadout both in and out of missions is a huge part of the game. As you progress, you unlock more and more parts that are purchasable using an in-game currency that you earn as a reward for completing or replaying missions. In total, there are over 300 parts available to equip in your mech's various slots, which include right and left arm, right and left back, head, core, leg, booster, FCS, which is your targeting computer, generator, and expansion slot. The variety of components really gives you, the player, enormous freedom when it comes to how you want to construct your AC. Want to build something that's quick and nimble, that stays at range to avoid damage? Or would you rather get up close and personal to deliver devastating melee attacks? How about making an actual tank with the heaviest weapons possible? The choice of how you want to approach the game's various encounters is entirely up to you. Personally, being the fan of Gundam that I am, I stuck to bipedal builds for the majority of my gameplay and found myself going back and forth between the various kinetic weapons, energy weapons, melee weapons, and devastating heavy weaponry that can be equipped on your shoulder slots. If you're the type of person who likes to tinker, you'll probably spend a ton of time here swapping around various parts, trying to find the perfect combination of speed, damage, and tankiness that lets you execute your objectives in just the way you want to. In addition to changing your equipment via loadout customization, there's also personalization when it comes to the visible presentation of your AC. Being able to create and apply custom color palettes to your components, coupled with the ability to control the amount of luster and metallic effect that's applied to them as well, is a really nice touch and just further adds to the ability to truly make your AC your own. Oh, and there's also an editor that allows you to create and share your own emblems. But what is the game actually like to play? Well, earlier I mentioned that movement was smooth, but also a bit weighty at times. I think that perfectly describes the feel of combat in the game. You'll seldom find yourself actually walking around. Instead, you'll be gliding across the ground with your AC's booster, taking off into the vertical to avoid enemy fire or to better position yourself for attacks. Firing heavy weapons or changing directions, though, can potentially slow you down in the same way that delivering a powerful melee attack will stop your movement for a moment, leaving you open to potential incoming fire. Combat is about trade-offs, and your AP, aka health, is a currency. Slowing down or even stopping your movement for a chance to deliver massive damage to a target is a decision that may either be correct or incorrect, depending on the situation. This is all further compounded upon by the game's stagger mechanic. Enemies in the game can be staggered by dealing excessive amounts of impact damage to them in a short period of time, opening them up to receive potentially massive amounts of damage. This isn't a big factor when it comes to the lesser enemies that you kill in 1 or 2 shots, but it's huge when it comes to tougher enemies and bosses. Being able to efficiently apply DPS to these enemies while they're staggered is crucial to effectively dealing with them. The problem comes with the fact that enemies don't remain staggered for very long. So, once an enemy is staggered, you have a limited amount of time to close the distance and let loose some damage. Make a miscalculation about how much longer a boss is going to be staggered for, and you may find yourself dashing in close to them just for them to wake up and unload a world of hurt onto you and your AC. It's the calculations of risks like these that makes Armored Core 6's combat so great. Its constant ebb and flow is honestly addicting, making it some of the best combat I've experienced in any game recently, if not ever. Now, if you're concerned that any of these mechanics may be a bit overwhelming, don't worry, the game does feature a set of in-game tutorials that are, in my opinion, really well done. They explain everything from the basics to the more nuanced details of different builds, weapon types, targeting, and more. You receive free equipment from completing them, plus they're quick and straight to the point. They don't overstay their welcome at all. There's really no reason to skip these. In addition to the main story, the game also features a couple of other primary game modes, Arena, and a multiplayer mode that allows you to go head-to-head with other AC pilots. Now, unfortunately, I had a really hard time finding a match on PC. I'm not sure if it was due to it being off hours or because of the release of the new Tekken game, but yeah, I waited for 10 minutes and couldn't find a match, and there were no custom games available either. Although, I'm sure I probably would have gotten shit on since I know nothing about the PvP meta and have never played Armored Core against other humans. Update. Confirmed, I got stomped on when facing other live players, but nonetheless, it's still nice to have the mode available, and the fact that there's a ranked ladder is a huge plus in my opinion. Arena mode was pretty cool. As you progress through the main campaign, you unlock different tiers of opponents to fight against, from F rank all the way up to the best of the best, S rank. Each opponent has their own unique build and a cool bio entry to boot, which gives you a little background on their story. Some of the main story's characters even make appearances as enemies in here, which adds to the excitement of facing them down. There's something satisfying about hopping into 1 vs 1 AC combat with no other enemies to worry about, just you and your opponent. My only complaint was the level of difficulty. Even as a new player to the series, I found the challenge level to be slightly lacking. I died a few times, but I didn't hit a wall facing any of my opponents, not in the same way some of the bosses challenged me. Regardless, I still really enjoyed Arena, and as soon as I unlocked the next tier of opponents to fight against, that's what I focused on. As an added bonus, defeating opponents in the arena awards OST chips, which are a sort of currency that can be spent to further upgrade your AC. These upgrades range from adding new capabilities, like the ability to perform a boost kick or quick turn, to just flat percentage enhancements like added energy weapon damage or increased damage mitigation. Overall, I really enjoyed Armored Core 6. In fact, I'm having a hard time putting it down. Even as I finish up this video, I'm working my way through New Game Plus and will then be moving right on to my third playthrough. I would highly recommend checking this one out. If the prospect of mech combat interests you in the slightest, this is a must play and I can almost guarantee you won't be disappointed. Let me know your thoughts on the game down below and if you'd like to see more Armored Core content in the future. This is Jarbo Gaming. We'll see you on the next one.